The charcoal between Victoria Emerson's fingers trembled as she stood at the edge of the canyon outside Cripple Creek, Colorado, watching the sunset paint the rocks in shades of amber and crimson, unaware that the thundering hooves approaching from behind would bring more than just dust to disturb her concentration. She had traveled from Philadelphia 3 months ago in the spring of 1891, seeking inspiration far from the stuffy parlors where wealthy patrons commissioned portraits of their pampered dogs and overf children. At 23 years old, Victoria craved something raw and honest, something that would make her heart beat faster when she captured it on paper. The Wild West promised that authenticity, though her mother had nearly fainted when Victoria announced her intentions to travel west alone. The horseman came to a stop several yards behind her, and Victoria refused to turn around immediately, determined to finish the shadowing on the ridgeline before the light disappeared entirely. She heard the creak of leather as he dismounted, the jingle of spurs as boots hit the ground. "You ought not to be out here alone, miss," a deep voice said, rough around the edges but not unkind. "Sun's going down, and there's been reports of mountain lions in this area." Victoria finally turned, brushing a strand of dark hair from her face with the back of her charcoal-stained hand. The man standing before her was tall and broad-shouldered, with sun-weathered skin and eyes the color of whiskey in lamplight. He wore a dusty brown hat, a faded blue shirt rolled to the elbows, and well-worn chaps over denim pants. A bandana hung loose around his neck, and a Colt revolver sat holstered at his hip. He looked to be in his late 20s, with a strong jawline shadowed by several days of stubble. "I appreciate your concern," Victoria said, lifting her chin. "But I have been coming to this spot every evening for 2 weeks without incident." The cowboy's expression suggested he found her statement foolish rather than brave. 2 weeks of good luck does not guarantee a third. Those cats are patient creatures. He gestured toward the rocky outcroppings above them. "They watch and wait until their prey feels safe." Something about the way he said it made Victoria's skin prickle with awareness, though whether it was fear of mountain lions or something else entirely, she could not say. She looked at her sketch, then at the fading light, and reluctantly began gathering her supplies into her leather satchel. "Wise choice," the cowboy said. "Where are you staying?" "The boarding house on Bennett Avenue, Mrs. Crawford's place." "That is a fair distance on foot in the gathering dark." "I will see you back safely." Victoria wanted to protest, to assert her independence, but practicality won out. She had heard enough stories about the dangers that lurked in the Colorado wilderness to know that stubbornness could be deadly. "Very well, thank you." He helped her onto his horse, a sturdy chestnut mare with a white blaze on her forehead, before swinging up behind her. Victoria felt the solid warmth of his chest at her back, his arms on either side of her as he took the reins. She caught the scent of leather, horse, and something indefinably masculine that made her pulse quicken. "I am Victoria Emerson," she said as the horse began walking toward town. "Vincent Rawlins," he replied. "I work at the Broken Arrow Ranch about 5 miles south of here. Been trailing some of our strays that wandered off during last week's storm." "Did you find them?" "Most of them. Still missing a few head, but they will likely show up at the water hole by morning." He paused. "You are an artist, I take it?" "I am. Landscapes primarily, though I have done my share of portraiture back east." "Back east," Vincent repeated, and she heard something like amusement in his voice. "Let me guess. Boston, New York, Philadelphia." That explains the fancy speech, and the notion that sitting alone at dusk in mountain lion country is perfectly safe. Victoria bristled. "I am not some helpless city girl who does not understand the dangers of the frontier. I simply believe the reward is worth the risk." The light here is unlike anything I have ever seen, and if I do not capture it when inspiration strikes, I lose something precious." Vincent was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke again, his tone had softened. "I suppose I can understand that. Sometimes a man has to chase what calls to him. Consequences be damned." They rode in companionable silence the rest of the way, arriving at Mrs. Crawford's boarding house just as the last light bled from the sky. Vincent helped Victoria down from the horse, his hands strong and steady at her waist. For a brief moment, they stood close enough that Victoria could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from his body in the cooling evening air. "Thank you for the escort, Mr. Rawlins," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Vincent," he corrected. "And you are welcome, Miss Emerson, though I would ask that you reconsider your evening expeditions, at least until the mountain lion threat has passed." Victoria smiled. "I will take your suggestion under advisement." "Something tells me that is your polite way of saying you will do exactly as you please. You are perceptive, Vincent." He shook his head, but she saw the hint of a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "Then I suppose I will have to make it my business to check on that canyon each evening around sunset, just to ensure no mountain lions have developed a taste for stubborn artists." "That is not necessary." "Perhaps not, but I will do it anyway." He tipped his hat to her. "Good evening, Victoria." He rode away before she could formulate a response, disappearing into the darkness that had settled over Cripple Creek like a blanket. Victoria stood on the porch for a long moment, her heart doing strange things in her chest, before finally going inside. Mrs. Crawford, a plump woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, looked up from her knitting as Victoria entered the parlor. "You are cutting it close tonight, dear." Was beginning to worry. "I lost track of time," Victoria admitted. "But a kind rancher ensured I made it home safely." Mrs. Crawford's eyebrows rose with interest. "A rancher, you say? Tall fellow, brown hat, riding a chestnut mare." "Yes, that sounds right. Vincent Rawlins." "Oh my," Mrs. Crawford set down her knitting, her expression delighted. "Vincent Rawlins is one of the finest young men in this county. Works harder than any 3 men combined, honest as the day is long, and handsome as sin to boot. Though he has been something of a lone wolf since his father passed 2 years ago. Keeps to himself mostly, focused on keeping the broken arrow running." Victoria felt heat rise to her cheeks. "He seemed quite capable." "Capable indeed," Mrs. Crawford said with a knowing smile. "I have seen many a young lady try to catch his eye, but he has shown no interest in courting. You must have made quite an impression for him to personally escort you home." "I think he simply felt obligated to prevent my being eaten by a mountain lion." "Perhaps," Mrs. Crawford said, picking up her knitting again. "Or perhaps there is more to it than that. Time will tell." Victoria excused herself and went up to her small room on the 2nd floor. She lit the oil lamp on the desk and pulled out her sketchbook, intending to refine the landscape she had started at the canyon. But as her charcoal moved across the paper, she found herself drawing something else entirely. The strong line of a jaw, the shadow of a hat brim, the way broad shoulders tapered to lean hips. She sketched from memory, surprised by how clearly she could recall Vincent's features after such a brief encounter. There was something about his face that demanded to be captured on paper, a rugged honesty that spoke of hard work and integrity. Her hand moved almost of its own accord, adding detail and shadow until a portrait emerged that made her heart skip. This was dangerous, she realized. She had not come west to lose her head over some cowboy, no matter how kind his eyes or how safe she had felt in his arms during the ride back to town. She had come to establish herself as a serious artist, to prove she was more than just another society woman dabbling in sketches between tea parties. But as she looked at the portrait taking shape before her, Victoria could not deny the spark of something that had ignited the moment Vincent Rawlins spoke to her in that canyon. Whether she wanted it or not, he had already begun to work his way into her thoughts, and possibly into something deeper. The next evening, Victoria returned to her spot at the canyon's edge, half expecting Vincent to appear and half hoping he would not. She needed to focus on her work, to capture the way the fading sunlight transformed the landscape into something almost otherworldly. But her ears stayed tuned to the sound of approaching hooves, and her heart jumped at every distant sound. He arrived just as the sun began its descent, riding up with that same easy confidence, dismounting with the fluid grace of a man who had spent more time on horseback than on foot. "You are not joking about doing as you please," Vincent said, walking over to where she stood with her easel set up, charcoal in hand. "I told you I would take your suggestion under advisement. I did consider it quite carefully before deciding to come anyway." He laughed, a low rumble that did pleasant things to her insides. "You are honest, at least. I respect that." He moved closer, studying her work in progress. "That is remarkable." Victoria felt a flutter of pride at his praise. "You truly think so?" "I do. You have captured something I see every day but never really notice. The way the shadows pool in the valleys, the texture of the rock formations." He glanced at her, and there was genuine admiration in his eyes. "You have a gift." "Thank you," Victoria said softly. "That means more than you might realize." They stood in comfortable silence while she worked, Vincent watching the horizon for any sign of predators while Victoria's charcoal danced across the paper. She found his presence oddly comforting rather than distracting, as though he belonged in this space with her. "What made you leave Philadelphia?" Vincent asked after a while. "Seems like a city woman would have plenty of opportunities back east." "Opportunities to paint what was expected of me, perhaps. Pretty pictures for pretty parlors. But I wanted to create art that mattered, that captured something real and untamed." She paused, considering how much to reveal. "My mother wanted me to marry a banker named Theodore Hughes. Very wealthy, very respectable, very boring. When I refused, she said I was throwing away my future for a foolish dream, so I decided to chase that dream as far west as I could manage." "Takes courage to walk away from security," Vincent said. "Most people would have taken the safe path." "What about you?" Victoria asked, turning to look at him. "Mrs. Crawford mentioned your father passed. Did you inherit the broken arrow?" Something flickered across Vincent's face, a shadow of old grief. "My father built that ranch from nothing, worked himself to exhaustion, proving that hard work and determination could overcome any obstacle. When he died, a lot of people expected me to sell out to one of the bigger outfits, said I was too young to run a spread that size on my own. I was 26, thought I knew everything." He smiled ruefully. "Learned real quick how much I still had to figure out, but I kept it going out of pure stubbornness, I suppose. Could not let his legacy die with him." "That is not stubbornness," Victoria said gently. "That is love." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an understanding that went deeper than words. They were both people who had chosen the harder path, who valued independence and authenticity over comfort and convention. "I should get you back to town," Vincent said, though he did not sound eager to leave. "Light is fading." This time Victoria did not argue. She packed up her supplies, and they repeated the ritual from the night before, Vincent helping her onto his horse, settling behind her, the warmth and solid presence of him at her back as they rode toward Cripple Creek. "Will you be here tomorrow evening?" Victoria asked as they neared the boarding house. "I reckon I will be checking for mountain lions around sunset, yes." And if I happen to be sketching in the same area, then I suppose I will have the pleasure of ensuring you get home safe once again." Victoria smiled. "I would not want to take you away from your ranch work. The work will keep. Besides, the broken arrow borders that canyon. It is not much of a detour." He paused. "Truth is, I find myself looking forward to it." Her heart did that strange, fluttering thing again. "So do I." Over the following weeks, their evening meetings became routine. Vincent would arrive at the canyon just before sunset, sometimes sitting quietly while Victoria sketched, other times sharing stories about ranch life or asking about her experiences back east. She learned that he loved the land with a fierce devotion, that he could identify every bird call and animal track, that he had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh. Victoria found herself doing more portraits than landscapes, sketching Vincent when he was not paying attention, leaning against a boulder with one booted foot crossed over the other, staring out at the horizon with that thoughtful expression he got sometimes, adjusting his horse's tack with capable hands. She filled pages with studies of him, capturing the way the fading light gilded his profile, the easy strength in his posture. One evening, she was so absorbed in sketching him that she did not notice when he walked over to look at her work. By the time she realized he was behind her, it was too late to hide what she had been drawing. "That is me," Vincent said, surprise evident in his voice. Victoria felt heat flood her cheeks. "I hope you do not mind. You have an interesting face, strong features, good bone structure." "From an artistic perspective." "From an artistic perspective," he repeated, and she heard the amusement threading through his words. He reached out, carefully turning back the pages of her sketchbook to reveal the dozen other portraits she had done. "You have been doing quite a few artistic studies." "I sketch everything," Victoria said, defensive now. "The rocks, the trees, the clouds, and yes, sometimes people. You happen to be the person who is here most often." Vincent turned to look at her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. "Victoria." "Yes, I am not complaining. I am flattered, honored even." He touched the edge of the sketchbook almost reverently. "I have never seen myself through someone else's eyes before. Is this truly how you see me?" She looked at the portraits, at the way she had captured the quiet strength in his features, the kindness in his eyes, the competence in every line of his body. "Yes," she admitted quietly. "That is how I see you." He set the sketchbook down carefully and took a step closer. "I have been trying to find the right words to tell you how much these evenings have come to mean to me. How I spend my days looking forward to sunset, to seeing you standing here with charcoal on your fingers, and that determined look you get when you are working. How just being near you makes everything else seem quieter, simpler." Victoria's heart hammered against her ribs. "Vincent, I know you came here to focus on your art, to prove yourself. I do not want to complicate that or make you feel pressured. But I would be lying if I said I had not developed feelings that go beyond friendship." He reached out, gently brushing a smudge of charcoal from her cheek. "You have become the subject of more than just your sketches, Victoria. You have become the subject that occupies my thoughts from morning to night." She leaned into his touch without thinking, her eyes fluttering closed for just a moment. When she opened them again, Vincent was watching her with an expression that made her feel beautiful and desired and seen in a way she had never experienced before. "I told myself I would not let this happen," Victoria whispered. "That I would stay focused on my work, that I would not let anything distract me from my goals. And how is that working out for you?" "Terribly. I cannot stop thinking about you either. You have appeared in more of my sketches than the landscape has. I find myself inventing excuses to mention you in conversations with Mrs. Crawford. I choose my dress each day based on which color I think you might like best, which is utterly ridiculous because we only see each other at sunset when all colors look the same anyway. Vincent smiled, slow and warm. For what it is worth, I think you look beautiful in whatever you are wearing, though I am partial to that green dress you wore last week. Brought out your eyes. It was nearly dark when you saw me in that dress. I notice more than you think. They stood so close now that Victoria could feel the warmth radiating from his body, could see the way his pupils had dilated, could hear the slight hitch in his breathing. The air between them felt charged, electric with possibility. "May I kiss you?" Vincent asked, his voice rough with restrained desire. "Because I have been thinking about it for weeks now, and I need to know if the reality is as sweet as what I have been imagining." Victoria's answer came without hesitation. "Yes." He cupped her face in his calloused hands, gentle despite their strength, and lowered his mouth to hers. The kiss started tentatively, a soft brush of lips that sent sparks racing down her spine. Then Victoria made a small sound of encouragement, and Vincent deepened the kiss, one hand sliding into her hair while the other wrapped around her waist, pulling her against him. She had been kissed before, chased pecks from unsuitable suitors at Philadelphia parties, but nothing had prepared her for this. Vincent kissed like he did everything else, with complete focus and intensity, as though she were the only thing that mattered in the entire world. Victoria gripped the front of his shirt, steadying herself as the ground seemed to tilt beneath her feet. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "Even better than I imagined," he murmured, "and I have a good imagination." Victoria laughed shakily. "We are in trouble, the best kind of trouble." He pressed another kiss to her forehead, her temple, the corner of her mouth. "I want to court you properly, Victoria. Take you to dinner, go for rides on Sunday afternoons, let everyone in Cripple Creek know that you are spoken for, if that is what you want to. What about my art, my need to establish myself? I would never ask you to give that up. Your talent is part of what makes you who you are. I want to support your dreams, not stand in the way of them." He pulled back slightly to look into her eyes. "We can figure this out together, find a balance that works for both of us, if you are willing to try." Victoria thought about the life she had left behind in Philadelphia, about Theodore Hughes and his respectable boredom, about her mother's insistence that a woman had to choose between her art and a relationship. But looking at Vincent now, she saw a different possibility, a partnership built on mutual respect and admiration, someone who saw her talent as something to be celebrated rather than tolerated. "I am willing to try," she said. "More than willing." Vincent's smile was brilliant, transforming his usually serious face into something radiant. He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring the moment. When he finally pulled away, the last light was fading from the sky and the first stars were beginning to appear overhead. "I should get you home before Mrs. Crawford sends out a search party," Vincent said reluctantly. "She will want to know why we are later than usual. Let her draw her own conclusions. I imagine they will be accurate, true to Vincent's prediction, Mrs. Crawford took one look at Victoria's flushed cheeks and kissed swollen lips and broke into a delighted smile. "It is about time," she declared. "I was beginning to think you both were too stubborn to admit what everyone else could see plain as day." "What do you mean, everyone else?" Victoria asked. "Dear child, half the town has been watching you two make eyes at each other every evening. The other half has been taking bets on when Vincent would finally work up the courage to do something about it." Vincent groaned. Small towns with very observant residents, Mrs. Crawford corrected. "Now, Vincent Rawlins, I assume you will be calling on Victoria properly from now on, taking her to church socials and such." "Yes, madam, that is my intention." "Good. She will need a chaperone for some of these outings, of course. I am happy to accompany you when appropriate." Victoria bit back a smile at the resigned expression on Vincent's face. Courting in a frontier town still came with certain expectations, even if people were generally more relaxed about protocol than they were back east. Over the following months, Vincent and Victoria became a familiar sight around Cripple Creek. He took her on picnics in the mountains, taught her to ride a horse properly rather than just sitting behind him, introduced her to the men who worked at the Broken Arrow. She sketched constantly, filling books with landscapes and portraits, selling several pieces to wealthy mine owners who had built mansions in the area during the gold rush. Vincent proved to be as good as his word about supporting her art. He built her a proper studio in one of the unused outbuildings at the ranch, with large windows to let in the northern light and shelves for her supplies. He modeled for her when she asked, sitting patiently while she worked on more formal portraits. "You ever tire of being my subject?" Victoria asked one afternoon as she studied the way light fell across his face, trying to capture the exact shade of his eyes. "Never," Vincent replied. "I like watching you work. You get this look of intense concentration, like nothing else in the world exists except what you are creating. It is beautiful to witness." She smiled but did not look up from her sketch. "You are good for my ego. I am only telling the truth. Speaking of which, I have something I want to talk to you about." Something in his tone made Victoria set down her charcoal and give him her full attention. "What is it?" Vincent stood, suddenly restless, and walked to the studio window. "We have been courting for nearly 6 months now. I know that is not a long time by some standards, but out here, people tend to know their minds pretty quickly. Life is too short and too uncertain to waste time dancing around what you want." Victoria's heart began to pound. "Vincent." He turned to face her, and she saw nervousness in his expression, which was unusual for a man who usually exuded confidence. "I love you, Victoria. I think I started falling for you that first evening when you told me you were going to do exactly as you pleased. Mountain lions be damned. You are stubborn and talented and brave and beautiful, and I want to spend the rest of my life watching you create art and argue with me about taking unnecessary risks." He crossed the room and took her charcoal-stained hands in his. "I know you are probably thinking it is too soon, that we should wait longer, that you are not ready to make this kind of commitment. But I also know that you love me too, even if you have not said the words yet. I can see it in the way you sketch me, in how you look at me when you think I am not paying attention." "Vincent," Victoria tried again, her voice shaking. "Let me finish before I lose my nerve," he said with a shaky laugh. "I am not asking you to give up your art or your independence. I am asking you to share your life with me, to build something together at the Broken Arrow. You can have your studio take commissions, travel to paint when inspiration strikes. I just want you to come home to me at the end of the day." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. When he opened it, Victoria saw a simple gold band set with a small diamond, beautiful in its understated elegance. "This was my mother's ring. She died when I was 10, but I remember how happy she and my father were together, how they were partners in every sense of the word. That is what I want with you, Victoria, a partnership built on love and respect and the freedom to be ourselves. Will you marry me?" Tears were streaming down Victoria's face, and she made no attempt to wipe them away. "You really see a future where I can have both, my art and a life with you?" "I do not just see it, I want it. Your art makes you who you are, and I love who you are. I would never ask you to diminish yourself." He squeezed her hands gently. "So what do you say? Will you take a chance on a cowboy who fell in love with the artist who sketched his portrait?" Victoria launched herself at him, wrapping her arms around his neck and kissing him with all the love and joy and relief flooding through her. "Yes," she said against his lips. "Yes, I will marry you. I love you, Vincent Rawlins. I think I have loved you since that first evening when you were so determined to protect me from mountain lions." Vincent laughed and picked her up, spinning her around the studio while she clung to him, both of them grinning like fools. When he finally set her down, he slid the ring onto her finger, and Victoria marveled at how right it felt, how perfectly it fit. "When?" she asked. "When should we get married?" "Tomorrow," Vincent suggested hopefully. "I need more than a day to prepare. What about a month from now?" "That will give us time to plan something simple but nice." "A month," Vincent agreed. "I suppose I can wait that long, though it will be torture having you this close and not being able to call you my wife yet. Patience is a virtue. Patience is overrated." They spent the rest of the afternoon making plans, imagining their future together at the Broken Arrow. Victoria would continue her work, maybe even teach art classes to the children in town. Vincent talked about expanding the ranch, breeding better quality cattle, building a proper house to replace the small cabin he currently lived in. "We should have a big porch," Victoria said, "where I can sit and sketch while you do ranch work. And a bedroom upstairs with windows facing east, so you can wake up to the sunrise. A kitchen large enough for me to learn how to cook properly. Mrs. Crawford has been teaching me, but I am still hopeless with anything more complicated than stew." Vincent kissed her temple. "I am not marrying you for your cooking skills." "Good, because you would be sorely disappointed." That evening they announced their engagement to Mrs. Crawford, who cried and hugged them both and immediately began planning the wedding. Word spread quickly through Cripple Creek, and by the next morning, well-wishers were stopping by the boarding house to congratulate Victoria. Some of the women in town, particularly the ones who had set their caps at Vincent over the years, were less than thrilled. But most people seemed genuinely happy for the couple, recognizing that they were well matched in temperament and values. The wedding took place on a crisp October morning at the small church in town. Victoria wore a simple cream-colored dress she had commissioned from the local seamstress, with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. She carried a bouquet of late-season wildflowers that Vincent had gathered himself that morning from the canyon where they first met. Vincent wore a new suit, looking uncomfortable but handsome as he waited at the altar. But when Victoria walked down the aisle on Mrs. Crawford's arm, her parents having refused to make the journey from Philadelphia, his face lit up with such pure joy that several people in the congregation wiped away tears. The ceremony was simple but meaningful, the words of commitment spoken with complete sincerity. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Vincent kissed Victoria with such tenderness that she felt her heart might burst from happiness. The reception was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food provided by various families from town. There was music and dancing, and Victoria found herself passed from partner to partner, though her eyes always returned to Vincent. He looked relaxed and happy in a way she had never seen before, laughing with his ranch hands, accepting congratulations from neighbors. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in those familiar shades of amber and crimson, Vincent found Victoria and pulled her away from the party. They walked hand in hand to the canyon's edge, to the spot where she used to set up her easel all those months ago. "I wanted a moment alone with my wife," Vincent said, testing out the word with obvious pleasure, "before we have to go back and be social." "Your wife," Victoria repeated, smiling. "That sounds strange and wonderful all at once." "It sounds perfect to me." He wrapped his arms around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest in a now familiar embrace. "I keep thinking about that first evening, How annoyed you were that I interrupted your sketching. I was not annoyed, just determined. You were definitely annoyed. But you let me escort you home anyway. Only because you made valid points about the mountain lions. Vincent laughed, the sound rumbling through his chest into her back. Whatever the reason, I am grateful you gave me a chance. That you saw past the rough exterior to whatever it was that made you want to sketch me over and over again. Victoria turned in his arms to face him. I sketched you because I saw something worth capturing. Strength, yes, but also kindness and integrity. You had this way of looking at the world that I wanted to understand, to translate onto paper. And now you are not just a subject in my sketches. You are my partner, my husband, my greatest inspiration. She touched his face gently. Though I will definitely still be sketching you. Probably more than ever. I look forward to it, Vincent said, kissing her softly. To all of it. The sketching, the arguments about unnecessary risks, the life we are going to build together. They stayed at the canyon's edge until the last light faded, then returned to the party hand in hand. Later that night, alone in the small cabin that would be their home until the new house was built, Vincent carried Victoria over the threshold and made love to her with reverence and passion, worshiping her body with the same attention to detail she brought to her art. Life at the Broken Arrow settled into a comfortable rhythm over the following year. Victoria spent her mornings working in her studio, taking commissions from across Colorado and even from back east as word of her talent spread. Her landscapes of the Colorado mountains gained recognition for their raw beauty and emotional depth, while her portraits were praised for capturing the essential character of her subjects. Vincent expanded the ranch operation, hiring additional hands and improving the herd quality. He consulted Victoria on every major decision, valuing her perspective even though she knew little about cattle ranching. They were true partners, supporting each other's dreams while building something meaningful together. In the spring of 1893, Victoria discovered she was pregnant. She told Vincent over breakfast, watching nervously for his reaction. He set down his coffee cup carefully, then let out a whoop of joy that probably woke everyone within a mile radius. He swept her up in his arms, careful even in his excitement, and spun her around the kitchen. "We are having a baby," he said, wonder in his voice. "You and me, we are going to be parents. Are you happy?" Victoria asked, though his reaction made the question almost unnecessary. Happy does not begin to cover it. I am terrified and thrilled and grateful all at once. He set her down gently, then immediately started fussing. "You should sit down. Should you be standing? What do you need? What can I do?" Victoria laughed at his sudden panic. "I am pregnant, not fragile. Women have been doing this since the beginning of time. I will be fine. But you will let me take care of you anyway. Let me worry and fuss even though you are perfectly capable." "I suppose I can allow some fussing," Victoria conceded. Within reason. Vincent proved to be attentive to the point of being comical during her pregnancy. He insisted she rest more, worried about her working with certain art materials, and drove her slightly mad with his constant concern. But underneath the hovering, Victoria recognized the deep love that motivated him. He was protective because he cared, because the thought of anything happening to her or the baby was unbearable to him. She continued sketching throughout her pregnancy, documenting the changes in her body with clinical interest and occasional frustration. As her belly grew, she had to adjust how she stood at her easel, and Vincent built her a special chair that supported her back while she worked. "You are still beautiful," he told her one evening as she complained about not being able to see her own feet. "More beautiful than ever, actually. You are growing our child. How could that be anything but miraculous? You have to say that. You are my husband. I say it because it is true. I have always found you beautiful, but seeing you like this, knowing what your body is doing, it makes me love you even more." He placed his hand on her swollen belly, feeling the baby kick. "Hello in there, little one. Your mother thinks she is not beautiful right now, which proves that even brilliant artists can be wrong sometimes." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes, hormones making her more emotional than usual. "I love you. I love you too. Both of you." Their son was born on a cold December morning, arriving a week before Christmas with a healthy set of lungs and a full head of dark hair. They named him Thomas Vincent Rawlins after Vincent's father, and Vincent cried when he held his son for the first time, overcome with emotion. "He is perfect," Vincent whispered, studying the tiny face with wonder. "Look at his little fingers, his nose. He has your mouth, I think." "He has your stubborn chin," Victoria said tiredly from the bed, exhausted but happy. Poor child, doomed to be stubborn from both sides. Vincent carefully transferred Thomas to Victoria's arms, watching as the baby instinctively turned toward her. "You did it. You brought our son into the world. I am in awe of you." Those first months of parenthood were challenging, filled with sleepless nights and the steep learning curve of caring for an infant. But they navigated it together, taking turns walking the floor with a crying baby, supporting each other through exhaustion and doubt. Victoria worried that motherhood would derail her art career, but Vincent refused to let that happen. He took over with Thomas whenever possible, giving her time in the studio, hiring a young woman from town to help with housework and childcare so Victoria could focus on her commissions. "Your art is not a hobby," Vincent told her firmly when she suggested putting her work aside for a while. "It is your calling, your contribution to the world. Our son should grow up knowing that his mother is a talented artist, that she did not sacrifice her dreams when she became a wife and mother." "Not every man would feel that way." "Then it is a good thing you married me instead of every man." By the time Thomas was a year old, Victoria had completed a series of paintings depicting life in the Colorado mountains that gained significant recognition. A gallery in Denver wanted to exhibit her work, and after much discussion, Victoria and Vincent decided she should go for the opening, bringing Thomas with her while Vincent stayed behind to manage the ranch. The exhibition was a success, with several paintings selling for impressive prices and critics praising her unique perspective and technical skill. But Victoria found herself missing Vincent terribly, counting down the days until she could return to Cripple Creek and the life they had built together. When she arrived home, Vincent was waiting at the train station, his face lighting up when he saw her. He took Thomas from her arms, hugging both of them close. "Welcome home," he said. "The house was too quiet without you two. I barely slept." "The exhibition went well, but I missed you every moment," Victoria admitted. "Success means less when I cannot share it with you." "You can tell me all about it tonight. Right now, let us just get you home." Life continued its steady pace at the Broken Arrow. Thomas grew into a curious, energetic boy who loved following his father around the ranch and sitting in his mother's studio while she worked. Victoria sketched him constantly, documenting every stage of his childhood. When Thomas was 3, Victoria became pregnant again. This time, she knew what to expect, and Vincent's hovering was slightly less intense, though still present. Their daughter, Eleanor Ann, was born on a warm June evening in 1897, arriving quickly and efficiently, as though impatient to join the family. "Another perfect baby," Vincent marveled, holding Eleanor while Thomas stood on tiptoe to get a better look at his sister. "She is small," Thomas observed critically. "When will she be big enough to play?" "Give her a few years," Vincent said with a laugh. "You will have to be patient." "Father says patience is overrated," Thomas announced, clearly parroting something he had overheard. Victoria raised an eyebrow at Vincent. Does he now? I may have said something to that effect, once or twice, in a completely different context. Their family felt complete with 4, though Vincent joked that they had room for more if Victoria was willing. She declined, feeling content with 2 healthy children and a career that continued to flourish. Her paintings were now sold across the country, and she had achieved the recognition she had dreamed of when she first came west. But more than professional success, Victoria had found something she had not known she needed: a partnership that supported her wholly, a man who loved her talents as much as her other qualities, a life that allowed her to be both an artist and a wife and mother without having to choose between them. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Vincent surprised Victoria with a trip back to the canyon where they had first met. Mrs. Crawford agreed to watch the children for the evening, and Vincent packed a picnic dinner. They rode out together on the chestnut mare who had grown old and gentle over the years. "I cannot believe it has been 10 years, Victoria said as they sat at the canyon's edge, watching the sunset paint the rocks in those familiar shades. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday that you rode up behind me and warned me about mountain lions." "Best day of my life," Vincent said. "Even though I did not know it at the time." "Mine too." Victoria leaned against him, comfortable and content. "Thank you for building this life with me. For supporting my art, for being an equal partner, for loving me the way you do. Thank you for taking a chance on a cowboy who had no business approaching a talented artist like you." He kissed the top of her head. "Though I am grateful you saw something worth sketching in my weathered face." "You were never just a subject for my art," Victoria said. "From the beginning, you were the subject of my heart's portrait. I just did not realize it right away." Vincent pulled out a small package from his saddlebag and handed it to her. "I got you something. Open it." Inside was a leather-bound sketchbook, beautifully made with thick, high-quality paper. On the first page, Vincent had written in his careful hand, "For Victoria, who sketched the landscape in charcoal and captured my heart in the process. May you never stop creating, dreaming, and arguing with me about taking unnecessary risks. All my love, Vincent." Victoria felt tears well up as she read his words. "It is perfect. You are perfect. Far from it. But I am yours, which is close enough." They stayed at the canyon until full dark, talking about their life together, remembering the early days of their courtship, making plans for the future. The children were growing up fast, and there would be new challenges ahead, but they would face them together as they always had. Years passed, marked by the steady rhythm of seasons changing and children growing. Thomas developed his father's love of the land and his mother's artistic eye, eventually taking over more responsibility at the Broken Arrow. Alina inherited her mother's stubborn independence and her father's work ethic, becoming a teacher at the school in Cripple Creek. Vincent and Victoria grew older together, their love deepening with each passing year. On cool evenings, they would still ride out to the canyon, though they took a wagon instead of horseback as their bodies aged. Victoria continued sketching, her hand not as steady as it once was, but her eye for composition still sharp. She had filled dozens of sketchbooks over the years, documenting their life together. Vincent working with the horses, the children playing in the yard, the changing landscape through different seasons, quiet domestic moments that might seem mundane but held deep meaning. "You have created a remarkable body of work," Vincent told her one evening as they looked through her old sketchbooks together. He paused at one of the early portraits she had done of him, back when they were still just getting to know each other. "I can see it in this one, you know." "See what?" "The way you felt about me, even then. It is there in how you drew my eyes, the attention you paid to details. You were falling for me even if you did not admit it yet." Victoria studied the sketch, seeing what he meant. There was a tenderness in how she had captured his features, a care that went beyond simple artistic interest. I suppose I was, though I fought it quite hard at first. Worth the fight, every moment of it. In the spring of 1920, Victoria had her first major retrospective exhibition in Denver, showcasing 5 decades of her work. The entire family made the trip. Thomas and his wife with their 3 children, Alina and her husband, and Vincent, now 78 but still strong and vital. Walking through the gallery, seeing her life's work displayed on the walls, Victoria felt a profound sense of accomplishment. There were the early landscapes that had first gained her recognition, portraits of frontier life that documented a vanishing era, intimate family scenes, and always, threaded throughout, sketches and paintings of Vincent. A critic from a Denver newspaper approached her during the opening. "Mrs. Rawlins, your work shows remarkable range, but I could not help noticing that your husband appears as a subject more than any other. Why is that?" Victoria glanced across the room to where Vincent stood talking with their grandchildren, his weathered face creased with laugh lines, his eyes still that same warm whiskey color she had fallen in love with decades ago. "Because he has been my greatest inspiration," she said simply. "He was my first subject out here in the West, and he became the subject of my heart. Everything I have accomplished, every painting I have created, was made possible because he supported my dreams without reservation. How could I not want to capture that on canvas?" The critic nodded, making notes. "It is quite romantic, really. A love story told through art." "The best love story I know," Victoria agreed. That evening, back in their hotel room, Vincent held Victoria close. "You were magnificent tonight. Watching you talk about your work, seeing the respect people have for your talent, I could not have been prouder." "None of it would have happened without you," Victoria said. "You gave me the freedom to pursue my art, the support to keep going when things were difficult, the love that inspired my best work." "We gave those things to each other," Vincent corrected gently. "That is what partnership means. Supporting each other's dreams, celebrating each other's successes, weathering the storms together." They fell asleep in each other's arms as they had countless nights before, still in love after nearly 30 years of marriage. Vincent lived to the age of 82, finally succumbing to pneumonia in the winter of 1924. He died peacefully at home, surrounded by his family with Victoria holding his hand. His last words were for her. "Thank you for the adventure, my love, for choosing me, for building this beautiful life. I will be waiting for you on the other side." Victoria grieved deeply, feeling unmoored without the partner who had been at her side for more than 3 decades. But she found solace in her art, creating a series of memorial portraits of Vincent that captured not just his physical appearance but the essence of who he had been. Strong, kind, devoted, full of quiet integrity. She lived another 12 years, continuing to paint and sketch until her hands could no longer hold the charcoal steady. She died in her sleep at the age of 83, in the house Vincent had built for them all those years ago, surrounded by her children and grandchildren. Among her belongings, they found her oldest sketchbook, the one from that first summer in Colorado. The pages were yellowed with age, but the images were still clear. Landscapes of the canyon at sunset, studies of rock formations and cloud patterns, and dozens of portraits of a young cowboy with kind eyes and a gentle smile. On the inside cover, in Vincent's handwriting, was a note dated the day after their wedding. "To my brilliant wife, you sketched the landscape in charcoal, but you painted my life in colors I never knew existed. Thank you for seeing something in a simple rancher worth capturing. All my love, always and forever. Vincent." Thomas and Alina arranged for their parents to be buried side by side on a hill overlooking the canyon where they had first met. A simple headstone marked the spot, with an inscription that seemed fitting. Victoria and Vincent Rawlins, artist and cowboy, partners in life, forever in love. The Broken Arrow Ranch stayed in the family for generations, each new occupant adding their own chapter to its history. But everyone who lived there knew the story of how it all began. With a stubborn artist sketching at sunset, and a concerned cowboy warning her about mountain lions, with charcoal portraits and canyon rides at dusk, with two people brave enough to choose love without compromise. Victoria's paintings and sketches were eventually donated to a museum in Denver, where they remain on permanent display. Visitors often comment on the recurring subject in so many of her works, the cowboy with the kind eyes who appears throughout decades of her art. They see the love in every line, the devotion in every shadow, the partnership documented in charcoal and paint. It became a famous love story in Colorado history. The Eastern artist and the Western rancher who proved that passion and partnership could coexist, that a woman did not have to choose between her art and her heart, that true love meant supporting each other's dreams without reservation. Young artists visited the museum to study Victoria's technique, but they left thinking about the love story behind the art. How she had captured not just landscapes and portraits, but a life fully lived, a partnership that endured, a love that transformed two people into something greater than they could have been alone. The canyon outside Cripple Creek still stands, its rock formations unchanged by time. Sometimes, locals say, on evenings when the sunset is particularly beautiful, you can almost see them there. A woman with charcoal-stained fingers and determined eyes, a man with a weathered face and gentle smile, standing together at the edge of forever, creating art and building love in the wild beauty of the Colorado mountains. Their story became a reminder that the best love stories are not about grand gestures or dramatic sacrifices, but about two people choosing each other every day, supporting each other's dreams, building a life together that honors both individual passions and shared commitment. Victoria had come west seeking inspiration for her art, never imagining she would find a love that would become her greatest masterpiece. Vincent had been focused on preserving his father's legacy, never expecting that a stubborn artist would become the center of his world. Together, they proved that life's greatest beauty often comes from unexpected meetings and the courage to pursue what calls to your heart. The landscape Victoria sketched in charcoal that first summer in Colorado captured the stark beauty of the West. But it was the cowboy who rode into her life, concerned about mountain lions and determined to keep her safe, who became the true subject of her heart's portrait. And that portrait, painted across decades of devotion, partnership, and unwavering love, proved to be her most enduring work of art. Their grandchildren grew up hearing stories about how they met, about the early days of courtship, about building a life that made room for both art and ranching, independence and partnership. Those stories were passed down through generations, becoming family legend, a reminder that true love means supporting your partner's dreams as fiercely as you pursue your own. The studio Vincent built for Victoria still stood at the Broken Arrow more than a century later, converted into a small museum celebrating her work and their love story. Young couples visited on their anniversaries, hoping some of that lasting devotion would rub off on them. Artists came seeking inspiration, wanting to understand how Victoria had managed to balance career and family in an era when women were expected to choose one or the other. But the real secret, preserved in letters between Victoria and Vincent that the family eventually published, was simple. They had chosen each other every single day. When Vincent's ranching demands conflicted with Victoria's exhibition schedule, they found compromises. When Victoria's career took her away from home, Vincent supported her fully while managing things at the ranch. When Vincent needed her presence, Victoria prioritized him without resentment. They had built their partnership on mutual respect, honest communication, and the fundamental belief that love meant wanting your partner to thrive, not just survive. Vincent had never asked Victoria to dim her light to make him feel more comfortable. Victoria had never resented Vincent's devotion to the ranch. That was his heritage and passion. The story of how Victoria sketched the landscape in charcoal and found that a cowboy had become the subject of her heart's portrait resonated because it spoke to a universal truth. The best relationships are the ones where both people can be fully themselves, where support flows both ways, where partnership means building something together that neither could have created alone. In the end, Victoria's artistic legacy was impressive. Her paintings hung in museums, her techniques were studied in art schools, her depictions of the American West influenced generations of artists. But ask anyone in Cripple Creek what they remembered most about Victoria Emerson Rawlins, and they would talk about her love story with Vincent, about how they had defied expectations and built a marriage that was truly equal, truly supportive, truly devoted. It was a legacy worth more than any painting, more valuable than any artistic recognition. It was proof that in the rough landscape of the Wild West, among the challenges and hardships of frontier life, love could still flourish in its purest form. Two people from different worlds had found common ground, built a family, created a partnership that lasted until death and beyond. And every time someone looked at Victoria's portraits of Vincent, they could see it there in the careful strokes, the loving attention to detail, the way she had captured not just his physical appearance but his essential character. The charcoal sketches and oil paintings were more than art. They were love letters, visual poems, testaments to a devotion that had shaped both their lives. The cowboy had become the subject of the artist's heart, and in doing so had become immortal. Not just in the paintings that preserved his image, but in the story of their love that continued to inspire long after both had passed. It was a reminder that the greatest art comes from the heart, and the greatest love stories are those written by two people committed to supporting each other's dreams while building something beautiful together. And so the story ended as all the best love stories should, with two people who found each other against the odds, loved each other without reservation, supported each other without compromise, and left behind a legacy that spoke not just to their individual achievements, but to the power of true partnership. Victoria had sketched the landscape in charcoal, but she had painted her life with Vincent in colors that would never fade, creating a masterpiece that would inspire generations to come.